All right, so in regards to being able to take a plant that has a bunch of different leaves on it and getting some ability to control the textures that are on the leaves from a sort of more, not so much random, but just a variety perspective. As I pointed out, if I select this bunch of leaves and I go to the UV texture editor, every single leaf is in 0 to 1, and so they're all getting the same leaf. So what we can do is break this up so that the leaves are organized into quadrants of 2 by 2 or 3 by 3. So the way to do this is using a cool script that I found, which you can find by going to Google and just doing a search for mental ray forests, and you'll end up finding a thread that's at CG Talk or CG Society forums, which is really awesome, called Forests and Maya Mental Ray. And it's, as you can see here, over 70 pages long of really useful information. And this guy, Tostao Wayne, has a bunch of great posts in here. And one of them is this script. And so basically just go in and take all the text that's in the script, like so, and just copy it and paste it onto your shelf in Maya so that you can execute it. And what this does, as you can see here, is, well, he doesn't really explain it, but it allows you to take something like we have and break it out into different UV quadrants. And so for it to work, though, if we had something like this, where we have a bunch of different plants, we'd want to separate it just under polygons, mesh separate, before we use the script. And also, you're going to want to turn off construction history just so it performs a little faster. So if I go to construction history, turn that off. If you have a case where you have a paint effect stroke like this, where, as we can see, this one has 7 different plants in it, and we want to make each one of these plants its own separate one, which is useful for a variety of reasons. But we simply would just go to mesh separate. And so what this is going to do, let me do that again. And for some reason, it doesn't want to do it. Let's do it for an individual one. Yeah, that makes sense. So let's go and grab just, let's say, the branches, mesh separate. And then we'll do the same thing for the leaves, mesh separate. So it's going to go from being a single poly object for all of the branches and a single object for all of the leaves. You can see now I can select individual leaves and individual branches. So the next thing that I would do is I'm just going to go and let's say we grab the leaves and turn those off for a second. And this is my shrub mesh group. I'm going to make the ground plane reference, and let's just hide it for a second. And I'm just going to go and grab, zoom in. We can see again, every single thing has been separated out. And then I'm going to recombine. So mesh combine, mesh combine, mesh combine. And so hiding the leaves just made it easier for me to select the branches. So mesh combine. And then that one. So once seeing here, we now have these 7 poly surfaces, and they don't have construction history because I turned that off. And so I'm going to group these. And so this is my shrub mesh, and let's just say we'll call them separated. And then I'm going to go and take that and hide it. Go to the leaves, and make those visible, and do the same thing inside here. So I'm going to go and grab those leaves and combine them. So I'm combining the leaves of individual groups inside here. So couple more to do. Just moving the camera so that it's as easy as possible to select them. And then just one more. All right. And so now I can go and take all of those and parent them into that group, which I will make visible. So this is now my new shrub mesh group. So it's the exact same thing, has the same shaders assigned to it. So you can see that if I go and select the branch there, it has the shrub mesh branch MIA, and if I grab this one, it has that surface shader, which I should rename, but there you go. So in regards to what I'm talking about, obviously I could also go and take the individual branches and group them with their leaves so that each one of these are easy to position on their own. But that would just be a matter of being like, okay, well that one goes with that one, so that and that would get grouped together and so forth. So that one is then going to go with that guy. And then the third one is going to go with that. Fourth one with that one. That one with that one. And that one with that one. And finally those two. So I have my shrub mesh, and in each one of these, if I select them all and do a modify center pivot, then I can see that now I can select, any one of these. So if I select this and hit the up arrow key, move tool, I can now move these apart from each other, which is convenient. But in regards to getting the UVs to be separated, I'm still in the situation where if I grab the leaves for this bush and go to the UV texture editor, they're all in 0 to 1. So if you grab that script, the one that I mentioned here, which is on page 15 of the forest and mental ray thread, what you can do is just go to your mesh, and the way the script wants you to use it is to go in and select a single leaf. So I'm just going to use Shift and the angled brackets so that I know that I've selected in single leaf. It needs to know how many polygons each leaf has. So by doing that, I can then go and execute the script. I'm just going to go and look through a different camera inside here. And since I made a new camera, I'm going to have to reselect that again. So let's go and grab again one leaf. And with that leaf selected, we can now execute the script. So I just took the script as I showed it to you and put it on my shelf, which is just opening it up so I can see the whole thing. But just click on it, and you'll get a pop-up. Do you want this to be 2 by 2 or 3 by 3? So 2 by 2 means you could have 4 different leaf textures and a single file texture. So that gives you, 4 options. 3 by 3, 9 options. So let's just say we do 2 by 2 and hit process. You can see it doing its business. It calculated very, very quickly for that bush. And now what it's done, if I select it and go to the UV texture editor, you can see that the UVs are now organized into 4 quadrants, which is really, really cool. So if I had inside here, if I select an individual leaf, it might be this quadrant, or this quadrant. So it's a nice way to basically take something that has the same texture for all of them, and as you can see here, there's now 4. It creates a new shader that it assigns to your leaves. And so in this case, obviously, you would then assign a new shader that has a texture with 4 different leaves on it. So if we go in and say, all right, well, we'll leave the same shader that we have on all those other bushes, or maybe we'll do it to this one too. So again, select it, select an individual leaf. So just find one that's easy to select, grab its faces, so I can see inside here. I've got that. Script, 2x2 process. And when it's done, there you go. So very, very, very nifty script. And so the way that we would want to go in and utilize it is if we now go into Hypershade. If I select the leaves on one of these other bushes and graph it, here's our two-sided material that we made. And so what I'm going to go in and do is for, let's say, these leaves, we'll do something different. So let's go and grab another leaf shader that we made. I think we made this one for the leaf, although that would be the MIA. Yeah, let's use this one. So this is another leaf MIA material that we made, which we're going to assign onto this shrub. And so I'm going to select it. I'm going to duplicate it. And I'm going to call this shrub 4x4 MIA. And I'm going to select the leaves from these two shrubs, assign that. And then I'm going to change the texture from being this ivy texture to a texture that has 4 leaves in it. I showed you one of those earlier. And so I'm going to go and browse. Go to my source images directory. In here I have a directory called leaves. So you can see I just have some leaf textures. And you can see I have these two. One which is these, let's see if we can go and get those to be a little bigger. So kind of similar. You can see I have a repeating leaf inside here. So these are kind of like dead leaves, while here we have a mixture of the two. So let's say we go and grab that one and double click on it, or let's use one that has some green leaves. So I'm going to double click on that. So now we have a 4x4 matrix. It still has the ramp on it. I don't particularly need that ramp, but it doesn't particularly matter either. This file texture, we can see does have an alpha channel. And for the alpha channel that it has, let me go back to Maya. Again, it's being reversed and put through a luminous utility. So if we now, again, select objects with material, we can see where we've assigned it. Let's get our ground plane back and our resolution gate back. And let's now go and do another render. So let's say we go in and we can do a backlit render on this guy and see what's happened with these two shrubs. So render view window, and let's do a render. So, and for this we want to render our persp. Actually, let me just go to our regular persp camera. The same camera we were rendering before. Yeah, let's render, let's say from this point of view. Let's grab that light and again let's get a little bit of a backlight. And then render view. I just wanted to render from the same camera we used before. Save that and render. Okay, so at this point we can see that from what we had before, where we had the same texture for front and back for all the leaves, to having different texture for front and back, same type of leaf, and then here going in and being able to randomize where we have 4 different leaf textures being placed. Now it looks a little funny because obviously we have some leaves that are a little brownish as if they're older or dying, which means they would be far less reflective, and we would need to go in and start creating in our 4x4 sheet or 2x2 sheet different settings for reflectivity on the individual leaves. The point is just showing you the script and that it's very handy to be able to randomize in a way the leaf textures that you're getting. So at this point we've seen how to do a two-sided MIA material with the MIB two-sided, how to use a useful script to break up the UVs of your leaves into different groups. And so now the next thing to do is just to take everything that we've learned as far as creating plants and MIA materials for plants, and going back to our, let's sort of close this up a little bit. Let's get everything visible again. And go back to our library so that we can go and get everything assigned. And so since I've already done this in another scene, let's open that scene and take a look at what's going on with our plant library. All right, so what I've opened up is just a scene that I made using everything that we've talked about as far as creating different paint effect strokes, converting them to poly, and creating the different shaders. And inside here, there are a couple things that we haven't gotten to yet in regards to grass and trees, and here things are a little dark, so let's just go back into shaded mode. So if I scroll back, we'll see there are a bunch of trees in this scene. Now these are paint effects trees, which we're going to talk about, but we're also going to talk about making trees with something called onyx, which is a little bit more believable as far as the kind of trees that we get. And then also in here, what we have, which we haven't talked about yet, is grasses. So we're going to get to that. But we can also see all of the different plants. And so again, just using a simple physical sun and sky setup with a directional light, and using the MIA materials, where all of the materials in here are very simple MIA materials. I'm not using anything double-sided or necessarily using lots of variety in the leaves, because this scene is really just a matter of just sort of making a quick library to grab and use for. So most of the time in the things that I've needed plants for, they've been midground or background objects, so I'm not worrying about trying to create hyper-realistic shaders for close-ups. So if I was, then that's where I would try and obviously have more variety of leaves and take the time to create bump map, reflectivity maps, or transparency maps even, to increase the believability. So we'll talk about some of that stuff later as we move on, but for now, hopefully understand that making the basic library for plants is straightforward. So if I just jump to Photoshop, this is an image I showed earlier of just some of the standard paint effects plants, just rendered with some depth of field, but again, physical sun and sky. And then same thing, this is the scene we have open right now. So if I just go back to Maya and switch to the render cam, this is what the scene looks like through this perspective. Everything in here right now is paint effects, and just looking at Maya, we can see that we're getting, relatively nice assets that we can use with different types of leaves, obviously some grass, some trees. But yeah, so that's where we'll stop for now with plants, as far as paint effects derived plants. And so now we're going to move on to some other subjects that are related. And so I'm going to show you a really useful and really easy to use tool for creating ivy. And then we'll move into grass. And then grass, as far as the shader goes, is very similar to plants. It's just there's a variety of strategies for how to approach populating a scene with grass. So yeah. Let's move on.